I never expected to find my boss, the woman who made my life hell for 3 years, crying on my doorstep at 2 a.m. with mascara running down her face. But what happens the next morning will change both our lives forever." Mark Renauld looked at his phone. His finger hovered over the reject button. It was the 5th call from his boss in the last 20 minutes. Normally, he would have ignored it without hesitation, especially on a Friday night when he finally had precious time with his daughter, but something felt different that night. "Dad, who keeps calling?" asked 8-year-old Lily, looking up from her coloring book spread out on the coffee table in their small apartment. "It's just a job, honey," Mark replied, forcing a smile. "Nothing important." His phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't a call, but a text message. "Please help, I'm in trouble." Mark sighed, running a hand through his tousled brown hair. Victoria Winters, his boss at the Reynolds marketing agency, completely unrelated to him, as she often sarcastically reminded everyone, was known for her cold demeanor and unreasonable demands. This woman had made his life miserable since he started working there 3 years ago, especially after he became a single father when his wife left. Late nights, working weekends, constant criticism. All this while trying to raise Lily alone. And yet, something about that text message had awakened something in him. Maybe it was a simple please, something Victoria had never used before. "Mrs. Garcia will come babysit you for a while," Mark said to Lily, already dialing their neighbor's number. "Dad needs to help someone." 30 minutes later, Mark is parked in front of the Velvet Salon, an upscale bar in the business district where many of their clients like to close deals. Through the window, he could see Victoria sitting alone at the bar. Her usually perfect sled was bent as she argued with the bartender, who appeared to be holding her car keys. When he entered, the picture became clearer. Victoria was clearly drunk. Her designer blouse was stained with what looked like red wine. Her usually flawless hair was falling out of its tight bun. "I'm able to drive," she insisted. Her words were unintelligible. "Do you know who I am? I can buy this whole place." "Madam, I called you a taxi," the bartender answered firmly. "Mark," Victoria exclaimed when she noticed him. Her face lit up with unexpected relief. "Tell this man who I am." The bartender looked at Mark with raised eyebrows. "You know her?" "She's my boss," Mark admitted. "I'll take her home." What Mark didn't know as he helped Victoria into his car was that across the street, one of their biggest clients was watching the whole scene unfold. A client who had just been considering withdrawing his multi-million-dollar account after Lectoria had been particularly harsh at their meeting earlier that day. And what Victoria didn't know was that Mark had just sacrificed the one evening of the month he had planned to spend finishing the picture book he was writing for Lily's upcoming birthday. "Why are you helping me?" Victoria muttered as Mark fastened her seatbelt. "I'm terrible with you." Mark paused, considering the question. "Because it's right," he finally said, "and because everyone deserves a second chance." Little did Mark know that those words would echo in Victoria's mind long after the alcohol had worn off, setting in motion events that would test both of their characters in ways neither of them could have imagined. The ride to Victoria's luxurious penthouse was mostly silent, broken only by her occasional directions and a few incoherent mutterings. When they arrived, Mark realized he would need to help her get in. She could barely stand, let alone walk. "Keys?" he asked softly. Victoria rummaged through her designer handbag before pulling out her key card. As they walked through the hall, the night party gave them a look that made Mark's cheeks burn with embarrassment. "It's not what you think," he began to explain. But the party simply nodded with a smile that suggested he had seen it all before. Victoria's apartment was exactly as Mark had imagined: minimalist, expensive, and cold. Everything was white, black, or chrome, without a single personal photograph or memorabilia. It looked more like a hotel room than a home. "Bathroom," Victoria muttered urgently. Mark helped her to what he hoped was the right door, then retreated to the kitchen to get her some water. As he searched for a glass in the perfectly organized cabinets, he noticed a single photograph attached with a magnet to the refrigerator. Victoria is much younger with an older woman who looked like her. They both smiled in a way he had never seen his boss smile. "This is my mother," Victoria said, startling him. She emerged from the bath, looking a little better, though still unsteady. She died 5 years ago on this day. The simple statement hung in the air between them, suddenly explaining everything about this night. "I'm so sorry," Mark said, handing her the water. "I lost my father when I was young. These anniversaries never get easier." Victoria took the glass and their fingers touched for a moment. "Why are you kind to me? I have been nothing but cruel to you." Before Mark could answer, Victoria's phone rang. She looked at him and her face turned pale. "That's Richard Townsend," she whispered, referring to the CEO, their biggest client. "Don't answer," Mark advised. "Not in your condition." But Victoria was already taking the call, instantly switching to a professional tone that barely betrayed her intoxication. "Richard, what a pleasant surprise." Mark could hear an angry voice on the other end of the line, something about unprofessional behavior and reconsidering our partnership. Victoria's face crumpled as she realized what was happening. "Richard, please, I can explain." Mark surprised himself by gently taking the phone from her hand. "Mr. Townsend, this is Mark Reynolds. I apologize for the interruption, but Ms. Winters just received some devastating personal news and was trying to process it privately. I help her get home safely. Perhaps we could set up a meeting for Monday to discuss any concerns you might have." There was a long pause before Richard answered. His tone softened noticeably. Mark continued the conversation somehow, not only smoothing the situation over, but also securing preliminary agreement for an expanded company. When he hung up, Victoria was looking at him with an expression he couldn't read. "You saved my career," she said quietly, "after everything I've done to make your life difficult." Mark shrugged. "As I said, everyone deserves a second chance." As he helped Victoria to her bedroom and made sure she had water and aspirin for the morning, Mark wondered if she would even remember any of this tomorrow. In his experience, people like Victoria Winter don't change overnight, and they certainly don't admit to moments of weakness. "I have to go," he said, turning to leave. "My daughter is waiting." "Your daughter," Victoria repeated. Her voice was quiet. "Lily? That's right. I didn't let you attend that concert last month." Mark was surprised that she remembered. "Yes, I'm very sorry, Mark," Victoria whispered, already falling asleep. "I'm so sorry." Mark didn't answer. He had heard drunken apologies before. They rarely meant anything in daylight. As he drove home, fatigue penetrated his bones. Mark prepared himself for Monday morning, when Victoria would undoubtedly pretend none of this had ever happened. This is how it has always happened. The powerful never acknowledge their moments of vulnerability to those below them. What Mark couldn't possibly know as he quietly thanked Mrs. Garcia and checked on his sleeping daughter was that Victoria Winters lay awake in her expensive bed, staring at the ceiling, making a decision that would transform both of their lives. Monday morning arrived with the usual chaos of a single parent's home. Spilled cereal, lost homework, and last-minute rushes to catch the school bus. By the time Mark arrived at the office, he was already exhausted, and the day hadn't even started properly. He braced himself as he approached Victoria's office, expecting either a cold dismissal or outright hostility. What he didn't expect was to find her waiting at his desk with 2 cups of coffee. "Good morning, Mark," she said. Her voice lacks its usual sharp edge. "I brought you coffee. Black with 1 spoon of sugar, right?" Mark looked at her momentarily speechless. For 3 years, Victoria never remembered him drinking coffee, let alone bringing him any. "Thank you," he said, taking the cup carefully, as if it might be some kind of trap. "I'd like to talk to you in my office when you have a moment," she continued. Her usual commanding tone softened into something almost like a request. As Mark followed her, he noticed that the office was buzzing with confused whispers. "Victoria Winters brings coffee to an employee." Something was definitely wrong. Once in her office, Victoria closed the door and turned to face him. She looked different, still impeccably dressed in a fitted suit, but there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "I remember everything about Friday night," she said without preamble. "I want you to know that." Mark shifted uncomfortably. "That's really not necessary." "It's necessary," Victoria interrupted. "You helped me when you had every reason not to. You protected my reputation with Richard Townsend. You were kind when I was nothing but cruel to you." She walked to her desk and picked up a folder. "I've been going through your personnel file all weekend. You've consistently been one of our top performers. Even though I've turned down your requests for flexible hours, passed you over for promotion twice, and generally made your life difficult." Mark didn't know what to say. This wasn't the Victoria Winters he knew. "My behavior was unacceptable," she continued. "Professionally and personally, I've taken out my own pain on others, especially you. And that stops today." She handed him the folder. Inside was documentation for a promotion to senior creative director, a position 2 levels above his current role. "It comes with a 40% salary increase and flexible working hours," Victoria explained. "You'll report directly to me, but you'll have autonomy over your projects and schedule." Mark stared at the documents in disbelief. Why? Victoria's professional facade cracked a little. "Because you deserve it. Because I was punishing you for having what I lost. A family that needed you." For the first time, Mark saw Victoria as a person, not just his tyrannical boss. "Your mother," he said softly. Victoria nodded, turning to look out the window. "She was everything to me. When she died, I threw myself into my job because it was the only thing that made sense. I resented anyone who had priorities outside of this office." She turned to face him. "Especially you, your daughter, and your constant reminders that some things are more important than quarterly reports." Mark thought of all the times he had to choose between his daughter's needs and Victoria's demands. All the school events he missed, the bedtime stories cut short, the weekends sacrificed. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Victoria said, "but I want you to know that I'm not pretending that Friday night didn't happen. It was the wake-up call I desperately needed." Before Mark could answer, his phone vibrated with a text from Lily's school. His heart sank when he read it. "Lily is ill," he said, already packing his things. "I need to go pick her up." And in the past, this would have earned him a snide remark about priorities and commitment. Instead, Victoria nodded. "Sure, take the rest of the day." Do you need anything?" Mark paused at the door, still trying to process this new reality. "No, I think we'll be fine, Mark," Victoria called as he left. "I meant what I said. Things will be different here." As Mark rushed to his daughter's school, he wondered if this change of heart would last. People made promises in moments of clarity or gratitude, but they rarely kept them once the moment passed. What he didn't know was that Victoria Winters had spent the entire weekend confronting truths she had been running from for years, and that his simple act of kindness had opened a door she had kept tightly closed since her mother's death. 3 days later, Mark was working from home, while Lily was recovering from a nasty flu when his doorbell rang. He opened it to find Victoria standing awkwardly in the hallway of his modest apartment building, holding a large gift bag in what looked like a soup container. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said, looking unusually unsure. "I just wanted to check on Lily." "Come in," Mark invited, watching with fascination as the woman who commanded boardrooms with iron authority now stood nervously in his cluttered living room. "I brought chicken soup," Victoria explained, holding out the container. "This is my mother's recipe, and a few books I thought Lily might enjoy while she recovers." Before Mark could answer, Lily appeared in the hallway, wrapped in her favorite blanket. "Dad, who's there?" she asked, her voice hoarse from the pain in her throat. "This is Miss Winters," Mark explained. "My boss." Lily's eyes widened. Queen of Dragons. Mark wanted the earth to swallow him up. Lily, to his surprise, Victoria laughed, a genuine warm sound he had never heard from her before. "Yes, the Dragon Queen," she confirmed, dropping down to Lily's level. "Although I try very hard not to breathe fire anymore." Lily studied her with the frank curiosity that only children possess. "Dad says you're very smart, but you don't know how to be happy." Mark closed his eyes in embarrassment. "Lily, that's not quite it." "Your dad is right," Victoria interrupted softly. "I forgot how to be happy for a while, but I'm learning again." The simple honesty of this exchange shifted something in the atmosphere. As Victoria sat with Lilia, listening to the little girl explain the plot of her favorite book, Mark observed a side of his boss he never knew existed. Later, after Lily had fallen asleep on the couch and Victoria had helped Mark clear away the dinner dishes, another surreal experience. They sat at his small kitchen table with cups of tea. "Thank you for coming," Mark said. It meant a lot to Lily. Victoria ran her finger along the rim of her cup. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said Friday night about second chances." She looked at him. The vulnerability was clear in her eyes. "Do you think people can really change, Mark? Or are we just getting better at hiding who we really are?" The question hung between them, waiting with a subtext neither of them were ready to fully explore. "I think," Mark said carefully, "that who we really are isn't something immutable. We are shaped by our experiences, our choices, our pain, but we can choose to be shaped differently." The rector nodded slowly. "My mother said something similar. Before she got sick, she was the kindest person I knew. Watching her suffer changed me. I built walls to protect myself and didn't realize I was trapping myself inside them." Mark thought about his own walls, built up after his wife left him, or how he put everything into being a good father and a reliable employee, never allowing himself to want anything more. "Maybe we both have some walls that need to be torn down," he suggested quietly. The look Victoria gave him in that moment, open, vulnerable, full of hope, made something shift in his chest. Neither of them realized at the time that their story was just beginning, that Victoria's transformation wasn't just about becoming a better boss, but about rediscovering the person she'd been before grief had hardened her heart, that Mark's compassion had not only earned him a promotion, but opened the door to opportunities he'd long since stopped imagining for himself. In the months that followed, the office watched in amazement as Victoria Winters became almost unrecognizable, still brilliant and demanding, but also fair, supportive, and sometimes even kind. They whispered about what might change her, creating complex theories that never came close to the simple truth. The truth was that on Friday night, when she was at her lowest point, Victoria had experienced something she'd forgotten existed. Unconditional kindness from someone who had every reason to turn her away. And in that moment, she saw a version of herself she thought she'd lost along with her mother. As for Mark, he found himself thriving both professionally and personally. With his new position and flexible schedule, he never missed Lily's school events again. The picture book he'd been writing for her birthday was not only finished, but with Victoria's encouragement and connections, it was being considered by a publisher. And if anyone noticed that the formidable Victoria Winters now regularly joined Mark and Lily on weekend outings to museums, the park, and the ice cream parlor, they were wise enough not to comment on it directly. At least not where they might overhear. 6 months after that fateful Friday evening, Mark and Victoria sat on a park bench, watching Lily chase butterflies in the late spring sunshine. "Do you ever think about how different things would have been if you hadn't answered my call that night?" Victoria asked. Mark sometimes pondered the question. "But then I remember something my father used to say. The most important moments in our lives often don't announce themselves. They just happen, and we only recognize them in retrospect." Victoria smiled, watching Lily, who had now made friends with another little girl and was showing her how to weave chains of daisies. "Your father sounds like a wise man." "He was," Mark agreed. "You would have liked him too, when you were no longer the Dragon Queen." Victoria laughed, a sound that had become wonderfully familiar over the past months. "I'm not sure I've completely lost my scales." "No," Mark admitted with a smile, "but now they look more like glitter than armor." Sitting in comfortable silence, Mark found himself thinking about the path they had taken, from adversaries to colleagues to friends to what they were becoming now. Something neither of them put into words, but that hung in the air between them in quiet moments like this. Mark didn't know that Victoria had spent the previous night looking at a photograph of her mother, having a long-awaited conversation with the woman who taught her love, before pain made her forget. "I think I'm ready," Victoria said suddenly, turning to face him. "Ready for what?" Mark asked, though something in his expression suggested he already knew. "Ready to stop being afraid?" she replied. "Ready to admit that what happened that night wasn't just about you saving my job or me becoming a better boss. It was about two people who built walls and found a door in them." Mark's heart beat fast as he looked into her eyes. Eyes that no longer held the cold calculation he'd known for years, but instead shone something warm and sincere. "Victoria," he began, but she shook her head. "Let me finish. I spent my entire adult life convinced that vulnerability was a weakness, that needing others was a flaw to be fixed. I pushed away anyone who might see through my defenses because I couldn't bear the thought of losing someone I loved again." She sighed deeply. "But watching you with Lily, seeing how your love for her made you stronger instead of weaker, it changed everything I thought I knew." Mark reached out to take her hand, intertwining their fingers. "If anything, you changed everything for us, too. Lily used to ask why I always looked tired. Now she's asking when Mrs. Victoria is coming next." Victoria's eyes glistened with nervous tears. "And what about you, Mark? What are you asking?" The moment stretched between them, filled possibilities. In the distance, Lily's laughter floated on the spring breeze. "I'm asking," Mark said softly, "would you consider being a part of our story for more than just this chapter?" Victoria's answer came not in words, but in the way she leaned forward, closing the distance between them with a kiss that felt like an end and a beginning at the same time. Exactly 1 year after that fateful Friday evening, Mark stood in the doorway of what had once been Victoria's cold, impersonal apartment. Now transformed by family photos, Lily's drawings, and the comfortable chaos of a home filled with love. Victoria was in the kitchen, trying to recreate her mother's lasagna recipe, and Lily was helping, generously sprinkling too much cheese on top. Neither of them had yet noticed that he was watching them, and Mark took a moment to savor the scene. If someone had told him 2 years ago that his tyrannical boss would become the woman who makes his daughter squeal uncontrollably, and who, looking at him like he'd hung the moon, he'd have thought they were crazy. But there they were, building something beautiful from the most unlikely of beginnings. "Are you going to stand there all night, or are you going to help us with this culinary disaster?" Victoria called, finally noticing him. Mark joined them in the kitchen, kissing Lily on the head and another kiss on Victoria's lips, just enjoying the view. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed and they were sitting together on the balcony overlooking the city on fire, Victoria handed him a small, wrapped package. "What is this?" Mark asked, surprised. "Open it and look," Victoria replied, an unusual nervousness in her voice. Inside was a first edition of the children's book his father had read to him countless times, the one he'd mentioned once, months ago, in passing. "How did you find this?" he asked, running his fingers reverently over the cover. "I have my ways," she said, Victoria, with a small smile. "Read the inscription." Mark opened the book to find Victoria's elegant handwriting on the first page, "To Mark and Lily. Some people save others without realizing that they are saving themselves in the process. Thank you for the second chance I didn't know I needed. I promise to spend the rest of my life making sure neither of us ever forgets what matters most. With all my love, Victoria." Under the inscription was a small velvet box. Mark looked at Victoria, his heart pounding. "I'm not very good at this," Victoria admitted, taking the box from him with slightly trembling hands. "I've never done it, but I know I want to be a part of your story, yours or mine, for all the chapters that come next." She opened the box to reveal a simple yet elegant ring. "I'm not asking you to replace anyone or change what you and Lily built together. I'm asking if there could be a place for me and your family officially, permanently, completely." Mark looked at the woman in front of him, the woman who had once made his working life miserable, who had transformed herself through pure determination and love, who now looked at him with such vulnerable hope and knew there was only one possible answer. "There was always a place for you," he said, pulling her into his arms. "We were just waiting for you to find your way home." As they held each other under the stars, both thinking about the unlikely path that had led them to this moment, Mark couldn't help but marvel at how one act of kindness on a dark night had changed everything. Sometimes the most important crossroads in our lives don't announce themselves with much fanfare. Sometimes they come like awkward phone calls on a Friday night, like moments of compassion when resentment would be lighter, like a second chance given with no expectation of return. And sometimes, if we're brave enough to answer those calls, to offer that compassion, to give those second chances, we find ourselves exactly where we're supposed to be, with the people who are always meant to be part of our story. If you enjoyed this story of unexpected connection and second chances, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more touching stories that remind us how one moment of kindness can change everything. Sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come from the most unlikely places.